Hey Suresh. Okay. So see a lot of people coming in. Cool. So how's everybody doing? What? Nobody's doing nothing? I didn't hear a yes, no, nothing. It seems like nobody has a mic. Is that the case? So we'll try to keep this session as interactive as possible. So you guys can actually unmute yourself and just speak if we are talking about something. But for the rest of the session, just like keep yourself muted so that there's no like background echo or anything of that stuff. Okay. What's up, Suresh?
Fine, sir. What about you?
Doing good, doing good. Thank you. I just finished a 3-hour lecture on the advanced class just now. So
tough day.
apologies if I feel like my throat is.
No, sir.
So
Not at all.
cool. All right. Let me quickly check how many more are joining as well. Give me one sec. So we have 4 more people who are supposed to join in. Guys,
Okay.
can you mute your individual mics while you're not talking so that there's a lot of background noise?
Okay, sir.
All right, thank you. I'll just end the call now. I'll share the link. All right. Let me get you guys in their IDs as well. All right, so I'm gonna just share my screen. Actually, before we do that, so let's quickly sort of just get a sense, since this is the first time we're doing this, let's quickly just get a sense of what everybody is hoping to uh, get out of this particular course. Everybody would have a different motive. Everybody, some of you are in college, others are already working in the industry and want to transition into the Unity/game development scene. So everybody has a different background that they're coming in with. So that's very interesting. Suresh, why don't you tell us what your end goal is from this course? Like, what are you hoping to get out of it, and what's your aim? Suresh, I think you're on mute. Yeah, don't mute yourself.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, did you get my question?
No, sir.
Okay, so I was asking, what were you looking to, what were you hoping to get out of this course?
Sir, become a Unity developer.
So right now you don't have any experience with Unity, correct?
No, sir. Basically, C sharp.
Okay, so you just work some work in C#, correct?
Yeah, yes, yes, sir.
Okay, got it. All right, cool. Setu, I think do you have some experience in Unity in general, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Little bit.
Okay, so for you, like how much comfortable are you with Unity on a scale of 1 to 10?
like
Sir,
fine.
to
Wait, is that Suresh or is that Setu?
Suresh, sir.
Okay, Suresh. I was asking that to Setu.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, actually,
Like two, sir.
I'll say like about five.
Sorry, say that again.
Five.
Okay, got it, got it. All right, cool. Hey, Willem. Hey, Willem, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear.
All right, cool. All right, awesome. So I think let's just start. Others are late, so they can just watch the recorded part later. Cool. So this is like our first session of well, not even first session. It's more like the zeroth session. So what we're gonna do is that you all know that this course is more about learning sort of the fundamentals behind game development, and specifically our focus will be on Unity, right? So in order to kickstart things off, the first thing that we'll learn today is nothing about Unity, all right? So the best part is going to be we're not going to focus on anything that's Unity related, uh, but instead what we'll focus on is making sure we understand how we do things. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you. Okay, so hopefully you guys are able to see my screen. This is not what you're going to see. That was from the advanced class. Uh, so you don't have to worry about that. But yeah, so you see the screen now. Has anybody worked with um, uh, Trello before? So this is a tool called Trello. Has anybody used this before? Just raise your hand quickly in case you have. Okay, so a couple of you have, others haven't. All right. So essentially, we use this tool for all our project management. So every week, when there is some material that I want to share with you guys, which are like, say, your reading material, your assignments, the topic that gonna get covered for that particular week, everything will happen here. Okay, so I've invited you all to this particular board each week where there will be a new board. So as you can see, this is the orientation board. All right. So this is week 0 starting point. Uh, Week 0 is special because you see some initial setup instructions here, right? These you won't see in every board. Mostly following boards would look simple like this, right? So you'll have your tech vertical, which will have for that particular week, what are the things that we're going to cover, what are the exercises for that particular week. So what I'm showing you right now is an example that I've set up for that we're using for our advanced batch, right? So this is the topics that are going to get covered, the exercises that you're going to implement. So everything is detailed out here, right? So uh, so this is how the board is kind of set up. So first week is slightly more elaborate. The rest of the weeks you'll only see this tech training, the doing, and the done. And I'll come to what these individually are and how we use them. Okay, cool. So this is just some basic information. Anytime during the whole time you're with us, you can use the admissions@outscale.com email ID to raise any issue, any question, anything related to that. This is your primary mode of communication over email. Okay. Uh, so in general, how we use Trello internally, right? So what we will do is every start of every week, a new board will be shared with you. Sometimes it might happen that we have work pending from the previous week that we were not able to finish, like maybe the assignment was too much, people needed more time. We might not have a new board for that particular week, but those will be exceptions. But more or less every week, there will be a new board that will get created. And your role is that every time you're invited to a new board, you'll not do anything on that board. Okay, that board is like a template. It's the standard thing that you're going to use. It's the standard thing that the future batches are going to use and the batches before you have used. So you're not going to do anything on that board, right? Instead, what you will do is you'll click on this show menu, more, and copy board. Okay, and give the board the same name / your name. So if this board is called week 0 training, so you'll say week 0 training, or so in this case it's called orientation, so week 0 orientation and / Mayank, right? And you will create your own board, and from the team you'll select none, right? So and create. So what this will do is it will create a duplicate copy of this board in your local account, right? Now you're free to modify anything on that board. So when you create, you'll directly switch to that board. So you don't need to go and find where this board is, but Trello will directly open that board for you. So you'll do two things there. One, you'll go in the invite option, add my email ID, and invite me to your individual boards. Okay, so you'll say, Mayank, you'll see my image and name show up because I'm already in the Trello ecosystem. So you'll invite me to your individual board. That's how I will get access to check on your individual boards. Okay. And also I'll share a link of an Excel file with you later where we'll keep track of everyone's individual boards. But all you need to do is just copy this link and paste it into that Excel file. That's all. So don't worry about that part for now. So every time a new board is shared with you, that's the first step you will do. So in your local board, now we'll jump into what exactly you need to do. So each of these, boxes that you see is nothing but a task for you. So each of them will have certain items which are set up as checklist, or it will have some description in there. And these are the things that you're supposed to follow. Some of them might be reading material, links to like blogs or resources that you have to read, right? So in this case, the first one we have is basically a basic setup of all the different tools that we're going to use during the course. So the first one is Git. So anybody who has not used Git at all so far, you can just raise your hand or type it in the chat. Anybody who's not familiar with the concepts of Git, does not know what Git is, has never used Git before, or maybe just not comfortable, knows a little bit about it, but not comfortable. Okay, so I've done a webinar on Git. So Suresh, since you specifically mentioned that you are not that comfortable with it, you make sure that you first go through this webinar. I've done a full 1 hour long webinar previously. I've linked the direct link here, which talks about the theoretical concept behind Git and how does it work. Okay, so understand that. If any of you are also not comfortable with these things, branches, merging, resolving merge conflicts, etc., make sure that this week is the time when you get comfortable with them. Okay. After that, I'm going to assume that you all know Git. Whether you know game development or not, that's not important, but you should know Git. So get super comfortable with it. The links for downloading Git, if you don't have it on your machine, are all here. There are a couple of guides, online guides as well, that are I've mentioned here. Even if you know Git and you think you are an expert in Git, still you will go and at least read through them to make sure all the topics that are covered here, you are familiar with them, and then you'll mark them as done. Okay. So on your board, what you will do is when you pick up the first module, so you start downloading Git, right? So when you start working on this, you'll drag this into the doing column, first of all. Okay. So once it's into the doing columns, then you'll start actually marking these things down. So, okay, I went to this link, I downloaded Git, I'm on a Mac. If you're on a Windows, it will show you that. You can switch whichever version you're downloading it for, download it and install it, done. Okay, you watch the webinar, done. Or at least you skip through important sections of it, done, 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 done. So once you keep marking all of these done, and now you see everything 100% on this particular task is done, from here, it should move into the done column. All right, simple enough. And then you'll do the same thing for all the other tasks. And these tasks are more or less in the sequential manner. So you'll always approach them in a sequential manner. Okay. So you'll mark each of these are done, but again, on your individual boards, not on this master board, right? Okay. So the first one is again about Git. So you'll go in, yeah, so you can use any of the apps. That's totally fine. But I recommend that you at least get comfortable with commands. So there is a lot of different things that sometimes you cannot do in the desktop apps that exist out there. So one second, let me show you. Yeah, so the next topic is basically the graphical user interface based Git application that exists out there. So if you're on Windows, you have access to Tortoise and source tree, but if you're on Mac, you only have access to source tree. I use Linux, so I personally directly do command line. But even on the other two, I prefer command line because command line, you can do things a lot more efficient, you can do a lot more things faster, and sometimes there are things that you just cannot do in any of these UIs. UI can only help you when you want to do any kind of merge conflicts and check around how to merge different things. Okay, so only those places UI, having a UI application will help because it's easy to see where conflicts are, etc., etc. But apart from that, make sure that you are comfortable uh, with the actual Git commands. So you understand what Git init means. You understand what Git merge dash blah dash something, at least the basic ones, not super deep, not super complex, but you understand those. Okay. So again, most of the basic ones you can actually see. So GitHub alone has a lot of these uh, guides in the same section of guides.github.com, which talk about how these particular things work. Okay. And then the last one is, once you're comfortable with Git, please check out our organization GitHub page, because this has projects from all the previous projects that the previous people have worked in, who have graduated already. And there are some very, so for instance, people who have applied for an advanced course, right? They have to go through this game dev challenge. They have to finish this full game dev challenge. So if you have talked to me about the advanced course, I'm pretty sure I would have pointed you to this particular thing and asked, hey, do you think you can do this, right? So everything for us that is code related lives on GitHub, and everything for us is open source because we aren't really building anything proprietary software as such. So this is one example of a previous game that one of our previous batches had done, right? So you can check out the trailer video for this particular game. It's based on the Hitman Go game, which came out, I think, 3 years back. It's a very popular game. The project here documents simple things. So as you can see, this was a 2-week long project, but still you see there are like 500, close to 550 commits here, 16 different branches here. And this was just 3 people working. I wasn't doing actively hands-on. I was just reviewing the code here. So 3 people committing code on a project at full speed in just 2 weeks results in 550 commits. Okay, so things can get complex very fast, very easy, and if you're not prepared with these fundamentals, the chances of everything getting fucked up is very high. Okay, so you don't want to be into that state. So I repeat time and time again, make sure that you're comfortable with Git, make sure you're comfortable creating branches, and make sure whichever tool you're using, command line, source tree, Rajat, you mentioned you're using the GitHub app itself, the Windows app. That one I don't like because it's very immature app in some sense. It doesn't have a lot of functionalities. So please try and use one of the other ones. if you're comfortable with it, it's fine for now, but more or less you should migrate to using the other one. All right. Cool. So far so good. Any questions so far? Just put them in the chat. All right. So the next one is actually getting started with Unity. So the link is already here. I'm guessing most of you already have Unity installed. If not, I would encourage you to install Unity Hub. It will, anybody who's not familiar with Unity Hub, I can quickly show you if you're not. Okay, so everybody's familiar? All right, cool. So basically, Unity Hub can quickly let you manage multiple versions of Unity with multiple different projects. So it gives you that one place where you can download things. So there's like a quick version. So this project is on 2018 version, 2018. But then if you look at some of the older projects, this is on 5.6 version. This is 2017 version. So you can see I can select that I want this particular project on which of the different versions. I have these like 6-7 versions installed of Unity. I can install new ones as well under the install section. So this is the default approach of now managing multiple versions of Unity, and more or less you will have multiple versions once you start developing professionally. So if you're not using Hub already, please switch to using Hub and get one of the latest. You don't need the very latest. Usually it has bugs. So get something that's at the end of the 2018 version for this particular course, and that should be fine. You don't need something 2019. 2019 one might have bugs at this stage. Okay, so that's that. Code editor. So I prefer Visual Studio, the original one. So I use Community Edition, the free version. If you have a professional version, a paid version, feel free to use that. VS Code is also better. So this says I recommend VS Code, but actually last few months I've changed my thought on it. VS Code, I've still found some issues while working, especially within Unity. So I don't recommend directly using VS Code as of yet. So please use Visual Studio. The only thing is that I've recently been more exposed to Rider, which is from JetBrains. It has a lot more functionality around debugging and breakpoints and things like that. But the only disadvantage is there is no free version for Rider. So you have a 30-day trial. So definitely check it out if you end up working for a company that has a Rider thing or has a Rider license. I think using Rider in the long run will be much easier compared to, or rather it will make you much better developer compared to Visual Studio. Okay, but again, the default preference is Visual Studio. At least you should have this. Okay. I hope nobody's using Notepad or anything like that for code editing. Okay, cool. So internally within Outscal and our developer community, we use two communication apps. Slack is the first one. If you are not familiar with it, basically it's this. So this is our like a Slack. It's a standard sort of a communication app that a lot of companies use. We have our own server of Outscale on Slack. It's just that it's not something that we use heavily, but I'd encourage you to use the link, create an account if you're not already on Slack. A lot of companies use Slack, and there are a lot of developer communities on Slack as well that you should join. These are open developer communities that you can connect with other developers, be it game developers, be it any other kind of developers, and not just India. I'm talking about global. So install it, get at least an account set up, make sure you're comfortable using Slack, and you can use the same link that I've provided here to join our Slack group. We don't use it actively. I'll come to it in a second why, but you should still have an account and join. Okay. The reason why we don't use Slack is because we use something better, which is Discord. So Slack is very much geared towards businesses, and a lot of companies, at least international companies, use Slack. In India, they don't use a lot because it doesn't have a completely free account. Even the bigger companies get away from using it because it gets really expensive the more number of people you have. Discord is a lot more. I'm guessing a lot of you might be familiar with what Discord is, but if you're not, it's similar to Slack. It's free. It's more geared towards gamers and naturally streamers for like voice chatting and things like that. So if you're like 5v5 players playing together and whatnot, you can actually use Discord and just use voice communication while you're playing with your friends multiplayer. So it was primarily built for that purpose, but now there are a lot of developer communities. If you're following Bracky's, the YouTuber, he has its own Slack Discord channel. So you can use this link to join our Discord community as well. If you're not already on there, I would highly encourage that you join it, because we use we use Discord for all our communication, be it within the groups that we have. So actually, I rephrase. So people who are joining the classes, it's mandatory for you to be on Discord. It's not an option. Sorry. If you're not part of the program going forward, then you can still join. So we have a community section that anybody can join. You don't need specific permissions or anything. But the other chat groups that you see here for the developers, these are only when you get access to these when you're only part of the one of our programs. But of course, we do a lot of discussions, announcements, and all in our regular channels. So it's always good to be part of this community. Cool. So predominantly Discord. Now the last one, this might seem odd, but I cannot emphasize the importance of it. So anytime you're talking to anybody, be it a company, HR, just a regular professional person communicating over LinkedIn, email, sending them a Google Doc, make sure you don't have typos, simple spelling mistakes. And Grammarly is one of the best free tools available. If you're using offline docs like the Microsoft Office suite of things, there's a plugin for Grammarly. If you're using Google Docs, then there's a plugin for Grammarly for Chrome, Firefox. So pretty much anything you're typing anywhere. So here also you can see there's a Chrome extension that I've installed. I've disabled it right now. But the whole point is that anytime you're doing anything professional, make sure that the quality of your communication reflects that you're treating it seriously, right? If you're communicating with the company, don't use the slang language as if you're writing a WhatsApp message to a friend, right? This does not get spelled like DIS. That's not this, right? So please get away from that habit when you're communicating professionally, which means when you're communicating on LinkedIn, when you're communicating in professional networks on Discord, when you're communicating with an HR, right? Doing any kind of resume / cover letter / email, make sure that you come off professional. It doesn't matter how good of a game developer are. If you're talking to an HR in slang language as if you were talking to a friend, you'll never even get the opportunity to showcase your skill sets, that you are a great game developer, right? Or any other developer for that matter, right? You'll not even get an interview. Forget about showing your skill set, right? So make sure, and trust me, this is the most single place where I reject people. Most of the time I can understand why people have bad technical skill set, but there is absolutely no excuse for writing slang language in a professional communication environment. Okay, so make sure that your communication is absolutely spot on. There are tools available to help you with it. Nobody expects you to write Shakespeare English, but there is no excuse for writing typos and grammatical mistakes. Okay, get it checked through a friend. So there are helpful links that are already set up. There is one for Windows, there's one for the browser. If you're using something weird, I'm sure if you Google, you'll find some Grammarly extension available for it as well. So emphasize it again. Git is super important. Grammarly is equally important. Okay, and then comes your actual technical skills, because you're not going to pass the first hurdle of HR if you're talking to any company or doing any professional conduct to get to showcase your technical skills if you're not going to pass that first hurdle. Right? Questions so far? No. So if you have a quick question, instead of typing out in the chat, quickly unmute yourself. Everybody has access to unmute themselves and speak out your question, and then go back to mute. So there's no background disturbance or noise. So we want to keep the session as interactive as possible. Okay.
Hello.
Yeah.
Sir, what kind of projects we are going to create in this?
Yeah. So.
Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Okay. So as for the question,
Yes, I can hear.
Question was from Rajat, that what kind of projects are we going to work? So we'll pick up one 2D project, one 3D project, and one project that purely focuses on building a UI for a specific game. So that will be slightly towards the end. And once we are done with these core modules, then you can move on to maybe form teams for your own. That part has I've kept it a little bit open-ended. If by the time you feel like you want me to make teams, then we can split you into teams. If you want to make your own teams and actually go and build your own projects to add to your own portfolio, you can. So that part is right now sort of flexible, and we can look into that. Cool. So that way we can cover a lot of the 2D concepts, a lot of the 3D concepts, and give you a broad understanding. So the goal of this particular program is not to make you an expert in making one specific type of game, but to give you all the tools to understand the different. So it's called basically becoming an horizontal knowledge versus vertical knowledge. Horizontal means you know the right pieces of all the things. You know 3D rendering, 3D collisions, 2D setting up UIs, a lot of different layers, scene management. So you know about these things, but you don't know too much complexities about, okay, if I'm building a very super complex game and it has a lot of heavy scenes, how do I create a setup where my scene is broken into 20 different scenes, and then at runtime I put all of these scenes together in some way, I merge them together and figure out and build a complex scene out of it, right? That complexity part, probably that's not something that's ideal, since you guys are just getting started. But the idea is that you will have that horizontal level of knowledge, that okay, I have this challenge, I've got to focus on the scene complexity part, start working on it, the basics of it, and figure out along the way how you want to do it. Okay, so the goal is to get you the breadth of knowledge. The depth will come over time, or if people from this batch move on to our advanced course, that's where we do a lot of the depth part, right? But you first need to build the breadth of it, because when building the depth, I'm going to throw out random stuff from all the other places, and I'm going to assume you know this, right? But you don't. Then there's no point talking about depth. So hope that answers that question. Okay, so the first core pieces for this particular thing, like I said, so your goal for this particular week is get these tools set up, get comfortable with Git if you're not already, check out any of these repositories, do dummy commits. You won't be able to push but push it on your own Git account. So you can actually say if you want to do something with the pre-course one, right? This doesn't have a code; it's just a construction of things. But you can fork it. This will take this repository, create a clone of it inside your own account, and then you can check that out and make commits to it, update it, do whatever you want to it, and then push it on your own. So you should be comfortable doing all these things. Okay. So once you have all these things set up and all these things are hopefully marked into the done column, then we'll move on to the actual setting, like focusing more on the code. So the first thing I want you to read is, there's a direct link to this PDF. So it's a book called Clean Code. Now, it's a very famous book by Robert C. Martin. Anybody heard of this book, seen this book, familiar with it, read it? Anyone? Okay, no. So this is basically, whether you are 2 years experienced, whether you are in your second year, from this day onwards, this becomes your holy grail of coding. Okay, it's not focused on any programming language. It's not about mastering any data structures or algorithms. It's about the simple things that make the most impact. Okay. When I say simple things, the very first chapter that you'll see is about naming conventions. So let me scroll down. So you'll see the very first chapter in the book is about how to name shit, and you'll be surprised how many people still do it wrong. Damn this book. Yeah. So chapter 2, whatever. So having meaningful names is more important than anything else, because the moment you name something test, I have no fucking idea what this test is. What are you testing? I see a script that says this is a bullet script, but then test what? Test bullet, test firing, test explosion? No clue, right? And worse, if this test is an integer that can, assign any integer value. It could be 1, it could be 1,000, it could be 1,000, it could be minus 230. I have no idea what this thing indicates, right? So make sure, you're doing these basic things first, correct? Because no matter what kind of code you build, chances are you're always working in a team, right? If you're working professionally, you're always working in a team. Even if you're working as an indie game developer, most of the time you might have other people collaborating with you on projects. So you might hire somebody to work on certain pieces of the game that you may need help with. Okay, so it's super important to name things right. Function names, variable names, class names, structure names, all of these need to be named correctly to show what they do or to show what they are, right? If there is a class named ABC, I have no fucking clue what this ABC is till I actually take 1 hour to scroll through all your code, figure out what you're doing inside this class, and then, oh, okay, ABC is a rocket launcher class that launches a rocket and does damage. Why didn't you call it a rocket launcher, right? Why did you name it ABC? It seems obvious, but there's still developers that do the same mistake. And I'm sure if you look back on your own previous code from any of your past projects, you will find certain variables, certain classes, certain function names that are named that only you would know. And I can bet you that even 6 months from now, you would also not remember what that function was because it's not named correctly. We move on, we do other things, and we forget about what we're supposed to do. Okay, so in order to become a good developer, these things are very important. So this is a book that talks about these common concepts. How do you check for testing? What are the things that how you're going to name these things? So naming is like the first topic, right? So testing basic things when you're implementing something, right? So imagine if you have a score or a timer or something, right? So if my max time is, my timer starts at 60 and goes all the way down to 0, one for each second. What happens when somebody tries to set a value of timer beyond 60? That's an error, right? But for all the functions and the code that you're writing for this timer, and you're setting the value for the timer at the start of the game, make sure nobody's setting the value beyond 60, because by design the value should never be beyond 60. If somebody's asking you to set a value of timer beyond 60, you throw a proper error message because it's an error, right? Don't just let it apply any value. So simple things like that can make big impact. So the way you will use this book is download it on your phone, laptop, doesn't matter where, but it's literally like you're having tea and you can read one chapter of it in 10 minutes, because all it's talking about is these simple concepts that you can read like a novel. Okay, just that you need to make sure that every time you read a chapter, from that very moment onwards, you are aware of those things and you're practicing those things. Okay, so go through, try and finish this book within the next couple of weeks, maybe maximum a month. It's not something that you have to sit today and read everything, but this book becomes your holy grail going forward if you want to become a serious developer. Doesn't matter gaming, it has nothing to do with gaming. Like I said, right, today we're not talking about Unity, today we're not talking about game development, today we're talking about how to become a good developer in general, right? So tomorrow, even if you switch your domain, the things that we're doing today, right, getting comfortable with Trello, literally half of the companies on this planet use Trello, right? Getting comfortable with using communication channels like Slack and Discord, right? We are all remote. There are a lot of companies that are working remotely, right? If you're lucky, you might end up working with a company internationally. Then also you'll be working remotely across time zone. So all these tools will define what kind of a developer you are, right? Beyond the quality of code, right? So if you're good at communication, if you're good at making sure that your names are readable, your classes are understandable, then even the best of the developers, and if you make any mistake, like a logical mistake, will be happy to jump in and help. But if I'm your senior developer, I'm sitting halfway across the world, and I have no idea, I have to struggle to read your code, trust me, I don't want to help you even to improve, right? I see you making a mistake, I'll like, fuck it. This guy is not worth even teaching, right? This guy is not even worth putting my time into in order to make him better. But if you are good at communicating, you're responsive, you're making sure you're professional, you're writing code at least that's very clean and readable, even if you don't understand all the technical concepts, that's fine. Everybody has a learning curve. I keep learning new things every day, right? But I make sure when I'm naming my variables, they're correct, they're readable, they're understandable. Okay? So these things are way more important than anything else. So one instance is how to name a variable and how to name a function. These are two different things, right? So if you have a variable which says holds a list of objects like cars, right? So I'll call it list of cars as the name of the variable, right? And then outside the class, you want a function that returns this list of class, right? So what would you call this function? List of class in capital L, capital O, something like that? No. List of class is a noun. Function names should be verbs. So your function should be get lists of class or get list of classes, or sorry, apples or whatever, right? So it's very important that you're naming your like functions as verbs and your variables as nouns. So those simple things make a huge impact. So start going through this book, use it like actually I like this particular diagram, and trust me, this is actually what happens. So when I sit and do code reviews for senior engineers, most of the time, it looks like what's on the right. every other line, you'll hear me say what the fuck and curse something. Why? Because there's some other shit that they fucked up, right? So, so most of the time it ends up like this. Once once I've passed you on, you'll be on the left. So most of the time you'll fall in the left category and not on the right category. That's the goal. Right now, when I review most of the coding challenge that people are applying in the advanced class also, they still fall on the right category because they do the same kind of mistakes. So it's always like, dude, what the fuck is this? So this is actually a very good applicable thing based on how many what the fucks are you saying per minute in a code review tells you the quality of code. So that's the whole idea here. So we want to focus on writing good code. We want to focus on writing clean code. So yeah. Okay. So the second link basically talks more specific to C#. So every language has its own notation of how to write code. How to, when to use small case, when to use uppercase, where to use brackets, when not to use brackets, things like that, right? So this particular link has a more of a mono/C# specific style guide. So go through this, make sure you understand what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, and that you're adhering to these code practices. So something like this, right? So if A and then the opening bracket is on the same line, and then you have your own code, and then the closing bracket. This is fine. This is the acceptable way, but this is not. And you'll be like, what? How is this not acceptable? They're doing exactly the same thing, right? But when you have a lot of code and a lot of complexity, this one line could mean that there are multiple if conditions, and everywhere you're wasting these multiple lines, that effectively your 100 line of code looks like 200 lines of code, right? So only it looks like it's a lot of code, but it's actually not. You're just wasting a bunch of random lines in there. Whereas this is also readable, this is unnecessary wasting lines, right? So these minor things can actually make you, who is somebody who's following coding standards and somebody who's not following coding standards. Fortunately, there are a lot of tools that are available that automatically detect these things and let you know before you commit your code. Okay, so it's not that I need to remember a lot of these. I don't remember all these. Like if you go keep scrolling through, there are a shit ton of it. And this is the smallest list that I've shortlisted. There's so many links, hyperlinks, and subsections here that like it will take you a week to read all of them, right? Even if this page you see, there's just like the list goes on and on and on. Do you think I even remember them? No, I've been working with Unity for 8+ years now, but I still don't remember them, right? It's practically not possible to remember them. It's just that you need to make this as a habit. So when you notice something that, hey, I'm not doing it correctly, then you fix it at that particular point, and next time onwards, you make a habit that I'm going to make sure that I'm writing like this and not like this, something, So that way, over time, this builds into your muscle memory. You don't have to think. Right now, when I write, this is automatically how I write. This is not how I write because it comes naturally. I don't need to think about it anymore. I've done enough that it naturally happens. Okay. I'm not using the link. Cool. So make sure you're going through this and understanding what the standard coding conventions are, and then following that. If you're coding in some other language, Google for it, JavaScript, Java, Kotlin, Python. Every programming language that has matured enough has its own style guide. Most of the time, your senior engineer, when they're setting up a new project, they'll set up the style guide as part of the project. So when you open your project in, say, Visual Studio understands the style guide and makes sure that whatever you're writing is within that same framework. So if you're like not following that style guide, it will show that little squiggly line under it with like a yellow color, and it will show that, oh, you're not following this particular style guide. It will highlight you that. Okay, so just be attentive of those little details. Cool. And then, so like this I briefly mentioned already, right? So you can basically uh, check out any, so in this case, I gave you in the Trello board, I gave you an example that you can check out the Battle Tank game, but you don't really need to check out the Battle Tank game. You can check out any other Git project, try to explore what's happening in it, make some changes, commit some files, push it onto your own repository. So for that, you need to do a fork first. Okay. Cool. So more or less, that's the first sort of week. The reason I'm not going specifically into anything more Unity specific, there are a lot more actually students who have expressed interest and are either transitioning into their colleges right now. So it was not a comfortable time for them to jump on as well. So wanted to take this time to make sure that we are setting up things correctly, and making sure we are following the right principles. And this opening class is actually the same class, a shorter version of the same class that I take for the advanced batch as well, because people coming in there also have never heard about clean code, have never heard about the specifications of writing clean code, things like that. So make sure you're comfortable doing these. So that will become really important going forward, because once you start working on individual implementations, that time, if I review your code and you're not following these standards, basically your review will get rejected. Okay, so till the time you keep making the same mistakes, your review will keep getting rejected no matter what. So that just means that if your review gets rejected, you have to fix these things again, and that causes more delay, which means you'll be late on your assignments. Okay, so the whole point is to not to point out mistakes for any individual person. If I am pointing out a mistake saying, hey Rajat, you're not doing this correctly, please make sure going forward you're following this. It's not that, the point is not to point out mistakes of a single person. It's the point is that you're still very young in your developer journey. The sooner you fix these and make them a habit, the better it will be for you down the road, because then you don't have to fix them later on. The whole point of us launching this introductory, I personally never wanted to do an introductory course, because there's so much material on getting started with game development out there that I personally feel other people have done a much better job in providing resources as well. But the problem is that a lot of people never focus on these basic things, right? They'll teach you about what physics is in Unity. They'll teach you about how to set up a collider. They'll teach you about how to build a 3D model and all that stuff, which is good, right? So you learn these simple principles of all the different pieces that are involved in game development, but nobody really focuses on how to think about becoming a professional, right? Anybody can follow Bracky's tutorials and build a simple nav mesh navigating, boxes and build a thing. But does that mean that's a professional quality game? No, right? So these are the things that actually turn it into a professional quality game, right? Of course, our focus is more towards the coding side of things. Everybody here is interested in coding and not the artwork of it. So our professional quality games means they're professional quality in terms of code, not in terms of art and assets and sprite. So we'll use art asset sprites that are freely available, that may be coming from Unity or some asset store assets. So we'll use those, because we want to make sure that our code is modular, our code is flexible, we're setting up the right things in a most appropriate manner, and we're writing things in a way that is optimal. Okay? Cool. Any questions so far? Looks like we dropped someone. feel like somebody dropped out. We had more people when we started. Give me 1 second. Okay, so no questions. Cool. So smallest assignment for this particular week is once you have everything set up, you'll fork this particular battle tank project into your own repository, and once you have forked it, you'll add a tank into the scene, create a simple player script. So I'll add actually, if you're not familiar with mono behavior or anything like that, don't worry, but don't worry about this I'll mark it as optional. If you already know a simple thing about uh, setting up a mono behavior on a particular prefab, you played around with Unity a little bit, then you can go into it. Otherwise, you can leave this out. But the idea is that change around anything visually, drag and drop different tanks into it. So open this particular project into Unity and move these things around, save the scene, and then commit the scene back into Git. So the goal is to make some changes to the project and be comfortable in committing those changes back into Git. Okay. So you can create a player script or drag the tank prefabs into the scene, and the whole idea is to make some modification and then uh, commit these modifications back into your Git repository. Good. So everybody already has been invited to Trello. In case you haven't, for some reason, received an invite, again, it's on the same Gmail ID that you have provided us. So make sure you accept that invite, create an account, come to Trello, clone the particular board like we showed earlier. So copy this board into your own board, not into one of the team board, but into your own board. Into your own account, and then add me to that particular. So I can have access to it. And I'll share you an Excel sheet where you'll put in the link for your new GitHub project that you forked and created, the link to that. And we want to see multiple commits on it, as well as we want the Trello board link in the same sheet. So I think I have a sheet open. Let me see. 1 second. Okay, no, so 1 sec. I think I have the sheet for the advanced class open. Yeah, so something like this, right? So so it will have your name, phone number. This is just the contact information. So the sheet that I'll share will have this thing already populated. You just need to make sure that this is correct. None of this is incorrect. Then for week 1, you'll provide your Trello links and you'll provide your GitHub links. And the same way for week 2, week 3, and so on and so forth. Okay. So each week, like I said, there'll be a new Trello board. So in that case, you will actually provide us the link for that. So this is for me to kind of quickly figure out who's working on what, who's doing what. So for instance, if I open, say, Rishabh's board, right? So in this case, see, Rishabh did not invite me to that board, so I can't access it. So this is a miss on his part. So if I open somebody else's board, hopefully they invited me here, right? So here you can see this person is working on his week 2 assignment, and they have implemented these particular things. They've added extension methods, enums, etc., etc. But a lot of these things are still pending, right? So they haven't actually either updated the status of these. Now I need to go and ping this person and figure out why is it not updated? Did they really not finish these things, or did they finish it but they forgot to update it? So that makes it a hard work for me, because if I have 20 people, I need to do that for all 20. right? So that's typically like a job of, say, a project manager, right? So like a project manager, it has to ping you every time to figure out what's the status of the things that you're working on, right? So it becomes annoying for that person to do his job. His job is not to ping you and keep asking, but his job is to actually manage the project. So make sure that you're doing these simple things correctly. Cool. There is one extra resource. So, and this is again a YouTube channel. Let me show you. It's called, have you guys heard of Extra Credits? This one. Anyone? Okay. So I'll share the link.
Are you looking to learn?
But there are couple of really good videos. You want to be a game developer. So Extra Credit has these couple of videos about, so you want to be a game developer, so you want to be a game designer, so you want to be a game artist, right? So these are experienced people. They have 8-10 years experience in the industry. I would recommend that you check these out because it kind of goes into the details of what exactly it is when you say so can anybody tell me what's the difference between a game developer and a game designer? Anyone?
Hey, hello.
Yeah, Rajat, tell me.
The game designer is the one like who basically tell the developer that what what is the demand like. We need an environment kind of a thing. We need a person who shoots bullet and enemy and something. And the developer is the one uh, who implement those things.
Okay. So in this example, we said about shooting and a player. So let's assume we are building something like a Call of Duty or something like that, right? So when I'm saying that a designer says that, hey, you got to build a bullet or you got to fire a bullet or something like that, right? In that case, what is the speed of my bullet? How fast does it go? When can I shoot? Can I shoot every 1 second? Can I shoot every 20 seconds? Or so these kind of decisions, who do you think makes? The developer makes, the designer makes, the producer makes, the artist makes, somebody else? Who do you think decides these numbers?
I think firstly the designer tells like we need a like machine gun kind of a thing or a shotgun kind of a thing. So firstly the artist tells the developer that we need this requirement and like 10 kilometers something like that. And and if that goes to developer and he firstly and if it logically fits then it's okay, but sometimes like we are working on a environment different environment rather than like normal life. So it's basically in the hand of a developer firstly like what speed we want.
Yep. Okay. So anyone else? Did anybody else want to add to that?
Yeah, I agree with Rajat. I think a designer would give insights on what kind of gun or what kind of weapon they would want, and the developer would judge uh, based on what weapon. If if the designer asks for an AK-47, well, the gun would obviously have to fire at incredible speeds with less recoil. So a developer would judge and would decide the speeds based on that.
Okay. So so more or less, you guys are right. The only difference where you got it wrong is so when it comes to deciding how fast things are, how slow things should be, if the time needs to be adjusted, the distance or the weight or any of those things need to be adjusted. That's all a designer's job. Okay, so as a developer, your job is to implement what the designer is asking you, and in return give them the tools that they need in order to adjust these values freely. Now the second part that I just said, the tools part, right, this is where majority times people fuck up. Okay, so you, like, even if you think about not just Unity specific, if you're not aware of Unity, right, like imagine if you're creating a player script, any language, Java, doesn't matter. There's a player script. Its job is to move the player at a certain speed. What you'll do is you'll, at the top of the script, you'll create a variable speed, right, and set its value to 5, some random number. And then you put it on an object. You'll see how fast the player is moving. You put in the speed logic that uses the speed 5. And then you're like, oh, okay, this feels like too slow. And this is like when you're implementing it for the very first time, right? So you'll say, oh, okay, this feels too slow. Let me just turn it to like 20 randomly. Oh, okay, yeah, whatever level that I have right now seems okay. 20 is fine, let's leave it. Designer plays the full game probably like 20 different times and says like, okay, this feels very annoying or very fast, or it feels like too strong, and I have this gap, but this developer can run so fast that he just doesn't fall, he just runs over it, right? So there are issues like that come up, and now he needs to change these numbers, right? So he'll come back to you and be like, hey, hey developer, this is too fast, make it slow. Like, okay, how slow? Okay, let me guess, let's make it, he'll be like, okay, whatever it is, make it half. Okay, so you make it half, you make another, and say, imagine if you're building for Android, you make another Android build, you change this number, you give it to the developer, he installs again, he runs it again, he plays the 20 different levels to figure out whether this value is correct or not, and he finds out some other issue with it now, right? So this process, this one cycle of developer doing something, coming back to you, telling you to change it, then you doing something and giving him a new build to test on Android and actually run it, this entire process for complex games can take days, right? Not minutes, not hours, days. And imagine if you're building something like Assassin's Creed and you're figuring out how high can my player jump when I'm latching onto a building, how high can I jump to the next one? And I have a city of full size of a Rome, right? Like a full city. Now imagine just changing these numbers and tweaking these numbers, how much time the entire thing will take, right? So when you do things professionally, you want to make sure you're doing it in a way that we are exposing the right, not just building the right things that the developers, the designers asked us to build, but we are actually building some tools around it as well that let so programmers should be lazy, right? They aren't lazy. I'm saying the programmers should be lazy. Why? Because sorry, one sec, let me stop my screen share. Sec. Yeah, so the goal is that you should, as a programmer, you should be lazy. So you should be thinking about, out of this iteration cycle of when my designer needs to change things up, how can I remove myself out of the equation? So every time he wants to change it up, I build him a small tool of some shape or sorts that he can actually run the entire thing himself. So he can go at it, changing these numbers for 3 days straight, and I'm happy in my corner building the next feature. Okay, otherwise you will never be able to ship a game on time if you're part of that loop. Okay, because the designers, they come up with these numbers in Excel sheets. Okay, so they come up with these numbers in Excel sheets and figure out, okay, how much how many times my player will die, how many times should I use coins to, like if you played free to play games, right? You know, like player dies, you get a window that says, hey, do you want to use your coins or watch an ad to respawn kind of thing, right? Everything, when does that pop-up need to show up? How many games after? When does an ad need to show up? All these small little things, there's numbers behind them, and those numbers usually come from Excel sheets which the designers design, and they give it to us as developers. We implement those numbers, but we want to make sure we are giving access to our designers of changing those numbers, running the game again and changing it again and running it again till they are happy, right? We don't want to be part of that loop. Otherwise we'll never get our job done. We want to move on to other features and implement other features, changing the numbers, tweaking the game, adjusting the difficulty, those kind of things. We don't want to be involved. Unless, of course, if they're balancing the game, changing the numbers, adjusting the difficulty, that is happening, and they figure out a feature needs to be re-implemented, or the entire design needs to be changed because of something that they thought initially didn't work the way the same it is, right? If there is a change in implementation, then we come in. Then we re-implement the things or change the things that they're asking, but we don't otherwise. As long as it's just changing the numbers, we want to be out of that scenario, right? Because we're not meant to do that, right? We should be lazy. We should think of ourselves as lazy programmers, and lazy programmers are smart programmers. Okay, so be smart and be lazy. Do smart work along with hard work, not just hard work. Okay, so don't be lazy in this course though. Otherwise your pull request and your code reviews will get rejected for sure. Cool. So yeah, so I'll put the name extra credits in the chat here. It's not something that so if you're interested about gaming in general, they do a lot of great videos, and it's just overall a great channel to follow. There are a couple of other resources if you're interested in like the design side of things, right? There are a couple of others. Just ping in our Discord channel, and I'll share the resources there itself after the call as well, or anytime. So overall, as a developer, you should have a good sense of understanding about design as well. You should at least aspire to be. So the best developers in the industry are the ones that can understand design, that can understand artists. So if I want to draw how we work, right? So we have programmers, right? And then you have designers, and then you have artists. And so I'm going to call this as a programmer. And then you have another role, which is project managers, right? So project managers, or in gaming industry, they're also called as producers. So you'll hear these two terms alternatively. Sometimes bigger companies, game companies, would have both the roles. So people who are just doing production, and people who are just doing project management. Okay, so it's important to understand all these roles, and we as programmers, we sit at the center of everything. Okay, our job is to understand what all of these people are saying. Most of the time, everybody is talking to everybody else. It's not right. We are the central piece, but our job is to implement and write code and connect all the pieces together, right? So if we fuck up, doesn't matter how good your art is, doesn't matter how well you designed the game, none of that is going to get reflected in the actual game. Okay, so this piece becomes very important, and that's why you can see game companies, smaller companies, the first thing that they hire are programmers. They'll not hire designers, they'll not hire artists, they'll not hire project managers. If somebody wants to make a game, they first need programmers, because before that nothing can get done, right? So so these are some of the core roles that all collaborate in the industry in order to make a full game, right? Of course, there are more, you'll have people who specialize in sound, people who specialize in music, people who specialize, in something called as, say, technical art. So there is a technical artist is also a very highly specific kind of a programmer, right? So today you start making games in Unity, but you realize you're more interested in programming on the the graphics side, right? So writing shaders, writing visual effects and things like that, but through code, not actually making them in Photoshop or Maya or any of these other visual editing tools, but you want to create these fire effects or explosion effects and things like that through code. So that is called technical art. So it's technical and it's art, and a lot of console games will always have a dedicated team of technical artists. Mobile games, especially with how Unity has become advanced, they once you guys mature to learn what basically shaders are. I don't know if anybody knows what this term means, but basically you're writing code in not C sharp, but in a different language that directly gets run on the GPU, not the CPU. So when you write normal code in C sharp, that gets run in the CPU, right? But this shaders that you write, that gets run inside the GPU, and now all you're doing is you're sort of defining how the uh, your screen shows up. So imagine if you have like that black, if you notice uh, old school 1980s TVs used to have that curved screen, right? So sometimes you can have like a curved effect on a flat screen. You want to give that 1980s feel. So corners would be sort of like blackish in color, and the screen would look like a little rounded, bended kind of a thing. So you can't do those things through like putting an image on top or things like that. That's not possible. So those kind of things you do through shaders. And typically people who can write new shaders, create new shaders are technical artists. Unity has recently launched a shader graph tool which lets you do this visually. So you can drag and drop things and connect these things. Bracky has recently made a couple of videos on it as well, on how to create custom effects through shaders, explosion effects, distortion effects, things like that, right? But like there's only a limit to how much Unity can actually do through a UI. But if you look at other game engines, then you have people who are technical artists who are doing more of these highly specific graphics oriented job. Cool. So check out some of these online resources, especially these couple of YouTube channels. Overall, get a sense of what exactly it means, and I think next week onwards we'll start to get more deep into covering the basics of Unity, how to get started, and uh, uh, C sharp in general. Quick question: anyone who has never touched C sharp or Java or any high level object oriented language? Anyone? Okay, so I'm assuming everybody is at least comfortable with what classes are, what structures are. Uh, do people know the basic OOPS concepts, inheritance, abstraction, things like this? Are you guys all comfortable with them? So if you're comfortable, just raise your hand, because silence could mean either. Okay. Okay. Milan, Rajat, are you guys comfortable as well? Okay. Okay, cool. So since everybody's comfortable, so I will not cover the very simple basics of what a class is, what a structure is, things like that. We'll directly jump into more of Unity and C# specific things, and start setting up the base pieces in order to build something. Cool. All right. So any other questions from today? Is everything clear about Trello, Discord, getting set up with Git, the first sort of mini assignment to focus on? Okay, so no questions. I'm assuming everybody's clear. I think next week onwards, we might keep this class in the morning. So I hope that's comfortable for everyone. By morning, I mean morning of Saturday itself. The reason is I have like 3 to 6 p.m. usually is my advanced class. I don't want to keep it immediately after it. The reason is because I'm already exhausted through that class. So I want to keep this class before in the morning. So I'm able to take the session much better energy levels. So hopefully that's cool with everybody to attend. If we are not able to attend for some reason, any specific class, every lecture gets recorded, and more or less I try to upload it to YouTube on the same day. So so you will have access to the recordings, worst case by next day, but I try my best to get it up on the same day. So tonight itself. So the recordings get shared on Discord only. So please try and avoid pinging me on WhatsApp personally. Can I share the recording? Just sign up on Discord. I'll set up a separate. Actually, there is a separate channel for this particular. Where is it? Where is it? Okay, so it's here. I actually move it to the developer section, but you will see a channel name by the name Intro and Intro Game Development, and I'll put up the link. So I'll create a playlist, which will be a private playlist. So people who are within this particular course, their email IDs will have access to that playlist, and going forward, all the videos from this particular course will be uploaded onto that same playlist. Okay, so make sure you're bookmarking that playlist link or adding that playlist to your particular YouTube account, so that going forward you always have easy access to that playlist, because continuing all classes will be marked with the class 0, class 1 kind of thing, and the link will be added to that same playlist. All right, so we'll go back and look at the make sure you get the accounts and all set up today. If you're facing any issues in getting anything set up, or links are not working, or some permission issue or anything like that, just ping me directly. Otherwise, we'll switch permanently from WhatsApp to Discord. The reason being, I get a lot of messages on WhatsApp regarding new classes admission process. So there is a high chance that the message gets buried so deep that I'm not able to get to you. Okay, but since Discord community are people already within the chat groups, I'm much more active and respond much more faster on Discord. Okay, so make sure that any further communication about this particular course, in general, the classes, any assignment related questions as well, etc., you're putting there, because if maybe I'm not around immediately to help you, but there are people who are going through the advanced class. There are alumni who have already gone through the advanced class and are now working in the industry as game developers with different companies. Everybody is already part of that Discord group, right? So if you have a question and specific issue with, say, like the physics or whatever you're trying to set up, somebody else will jump in to help if I'm not immediately available. If I'm available, which I am for 18 hours a day on Discord, I'll respond to it as soon as I can, right? So use Discord heavily. That's the best resource that I can offer you for during this course, after this course, anything, right? Like that's the best community that we're trying to build. So even if you're not part if going forward you don't end up for some reason being part of this course, still I would recommend that you join us on Discord as well as other game development communities as well, just to being, remain connected in the ecosystem. So let me just check if there is anything else I wanted to cover for today as well. No, cool. So looks like that's pretty much it. Okay, so give a basic implementation. Okay, cool. So I'll touch on the first 15 minutes of Oops. I'll make a note of it. Or what I'll do is I'll share a little bit of basic resources in Discord as well, Rajat. So everybody can brush up on the basic concepts. And that way we don't have to focus a lot of class time on it, but still everybody's up to speed. But we'll kick off the class by doing a small Q&A about Oops. So if anybody who's brushed up their concepts is having issues understanding, maybe one aspect of one particular thing, you can quickly ask that. We can just discuss that and then move forward. Okay. So instead of doing this, we'll do it as more of a homework thing. Okay. So if you, before I can shortlist some material, if you find something that's relevant for catching up, just please share in like, hey, this is a good resource that I found for Oops. Maybe others should just check it out. Then just please put it up in Discord as well. Right? Cool. Anything else before we call it a day today or call it a night? No. All right. Cool. So in general, I've been in touch with each of you individually for your onboarding process. So some of you need to send me some documents. Please do so individually. Others already have the process and timelines, etc., figured out. If not, please reach out to me anytime. And yeah, so next week onwards, we'll resume regular classes. Oh, for the classes, again, it will be on Zoom every time. The link, I'll set up a recurring meeting in Google Calendar. So every week, once you accept that meeting invite, the meeting will be at the same time unless there's an off case where we change the meeting time. So please make sure that you click the link directly in your Google Calendar, the Zoom link in the Google Calendar, and from there only you can directly jump into the Zoom call. Because if you try to do it some other way, it will ask for a password, and then I have to click. I get interrupted during the class because I need to allow you to enter. So use the password link that's provided along with the Google Calendar. Okay. Cool. Anything else? Or okay, so it seems like there are no questions. If there are, please feel free to use again Discord for any technical, non-technical, Unity, anything kind of stuff, right? All right, cool. So thanks guys for today. This was a shorter class. Next week, expect something around 2 hours at least. It might go up to 3 depending on the kind of topics we are covering. So keep a buffer of 2 to 3 hours from our class time. So most likely it will be 10 a.m. to 1 a.m. roughly speaking, but I'll confirm that in the next couple of days exactly what the time will be. All right. Awesome. Cool. All right. So have a good night, guys. Have a great weekend. Have any issues, just drop the message in Discord. All right. Talk to you guys later.